most likely never heard its name before. The company is Blackrock. But what about the news? I am sure that you think that there's a huge diversity in the media and the global landscape. But when you look at who owns the news, you might start to think about this a little bit differently. It doesn't really matter what side of the political spectrum that you fall on or what news source that you think is more truthful, because chances are Blackrock actually owns a portion of one of these news outlets. Fox News, the New York Times, CNN, the ABC, NBC, the New York Post, Sky News, The Sun, and on and on and on. In one way or another, Blackrock owns a part of basically every media organization or major news outlet on the planet, from North America to Asia, Australia, and beyond. Social media as well, Twitter, Facebook, which means by extension, WhatsApp and Instagram. Yep, Blackrock is one of the biggest owners of these platforms as well. In fact, it's estimated that in one way or another, Blackrock and Vanguard, which is the second largest asset management in the world, owns part of more than 90% of the media that we consume on a daily basis. So based on that, is it possible that Blackrock could have significant power in order to get any message that they wanted to across the world? I'll let you decide that one for yourself. Blackrock holds more in assets than the GDP of every single one of these places, and that is some serious power. And with great power comes great responsibility. So how responsible is Blackrock? According to the data, Blackrock is the largest investor in fossil fuels on the planet, as well as the main contributor to money flowing into the destruction of the planet's forests and ecosystems, including deforestation in the Amazon. There is so much more that I could talk about Blackrock. I could talk about how they have been accused of abuse of human rights towards the indigenous around the world. I could tell you that even if your bank or your pension fund doesn't directly fund Blackrock, they most likely still have access to your private information because of their own financial management system called Aladdin. And I could tell you that Blackrock's main competitors, such as Vanguard and others, are also just as worrying towards the state of the world. Now, if any of this stuff scares you, it kind of should. Companies with this much power can single-handedly sway the economic future of our world. But here is the worst part, is that it is your fault that these companies have this much power. It is all of our fault. It's our money flowing from our banks, our pension funds, our investments that are going directly to these companies. We might say that we don't want the Amazon to be destroyed or that we don't want our planet to be degraded, but everything comes down to where the money is flowing. They couldn't do this. They couldn't do any of this without us. Because without us, they wouldn't have the financial strength. There is a solution, and thankfully it's a lot easier to handle than the problem itself. And the solution is just to follow the money. When you deposit your money into a bank or you put it into a pension fund, that pension fund or the bank uses that money in order to make investments. This is how a lot of these banks and institutions make a ton of their cash. The sad part is that most people have absolutely no idea how their money is actually being used within their banking or their pension funds, and they do not know what these institutions are supporting with their dollar. So follow the money of what your bank, financial institution, or insurance company is doing with the money. And if you don't like what they're doing, simply pull out that cash and invest it into a small credit union or a local banking alternative. Also, it's not just focusing on where that money from your institutions is being invested, but who actually owns these institutions, such as the insurance companies or the banks or the pension funds. If you don't like where the money trail is leading to, find a different bank to do business with. All of this information should be public, and if it is not, just get in touch with your bank and find out this information. When you hear a media outlet telling you something about the financial state of the world, just follow the money to see who is actually sponsoring this news article or this information, because maybe there's someone behind there that has a specific interest in mind to make you believe a certain thing about the financial state of the world. And follow the money when you're making any type of investments at all, stocks, property, whatever it might be, and find out what that money is actually supporting. Find out what kind of damage that money might be doing. Unfortunately, there will be cases where it will be impossible for you to stop the money flowing to Blackrock or similar companies. For example, the government of Singapore is one of the largest shareholders of Blackrock via their investment arm Temasek Holdings, meaning that if you're Singaporean, it's almost impossible for you to decouple yourself from links to Blackrock. Here in Iceland, I don't seem to have much of a choice as well, because the only three banks in this country all seem to have some sort of linkage to Blackrock. The great news is, though, that you don't have to these days stick to traditional banking systems. There are a ton of online banks, digital-only banks that might be available in your own country. Again, you do have to do your research though, because there could be some online digital-only banks that have some sort of linkages back to these enormous companies. And in some places like Australia, there might be some alternatives for you to do banking with, such as small credit unions or the Bank of Australia that don't engage in any destructive environmental practices. Follow the money and vote with your dollar. And I don't mean just how you spend your money on an everyday basis, but also where it is that you're putting your money into, what kind of foundations or funds you're putting your money into, which might be supporting these large behemoths that are controlling our world and destroying our planet. None of us can really ever have zero negative impact on the planet, and there will always be somebody at the top. But when you do follow the money and you choose not to stay ignorant as to where your money is flowing, you can actually make a significant change. Remember that we are the masses, and if all of us make a small effort, this tiny effort of just checking where the money is flowing, we can make huge differences on this world.